You're listening to the Support Report with Be Present, where we share real stories from young adults and how support changed their lives.
Hey, you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Support Report. We are Be Present. And of course, I am your co-host, Justin Peters. And yes, you did hear that right, co-host. I am super excited to introduce to you somebody else that's going to be joining me on the podcast moving forward. If you didn't hear her story in the last episode, Chiara, why don't you come on, tell them a little bit about you, your story, and then what your role is going to be here at Be Present.
Absolutely. So, hey, Justin, I'm Chiara. I am the survivor content creator at Be Present. And I'm super excited to be joining this podcast as a co-host. So a little bit about me. I have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. So I'm kind of a forever cancer patient. And I've been trying to get more involved in the AYA cancer space. You know, I was diagnosed at 27, I'm 28 now. So I think the AYA cancer space has, you know, such unique needs that aren't really met with a lot of the resources that are out there about cancer. And so I've been really passionate about that. And so many of my friends told me, you know, we really want to support you, but there's really no guidebook for this. And that's kind of what led me to Be Present. I thought that the mission was so incredible to help every AYA feel supported and loved through all of their cancer treatment. And so now here I am. I'm going to be co-hosting the podcast with Justin. I'm going to be writing blogs, maybe videos. We'll see where this all goes, but I'm really excited to be part of the team and really excited to chat with you guys more on this podcast.
I am super stoked that you're joining me. I always felt like I was missing a perspective in this conversation, and I feel like we're going to round each other out really well here. So, not coming from an extensive experience with cancer, I'm able to ask a lot of the elementary questions, I feel like, but I also feel like you bring in a really important perspective in terms of having lived through so much of the experience and knowing some of the feelings that some of the patients and survivors and the other supporters within inside of this group, kind of what their role is. So I'm excited to learn from you. Super stoked to have you on. We've had so many conversations offline and it's been a blast. I am stoked. And I saw recently you posted a blog post, and it's cool that you're creating some written content for us as well. I believe it was on staying connected even during COVID. And it talked about, because you you were diagnosed with cancer September 2020. So everybody knows that's like in the midst of it. So super cool that you put out your thoughts on how people could stay connected. Let's go through a couple of those real quick before we jump in and introduce our guest today. I loved the virtual trivia and escape room ideas. Was that one of your favorite things that you did in terms of like the COVID friendly activities?
It totally was. I am so competitive. Like, it's a problem how competitive I can be. And so that was such a fun way to like be competitive with my friends, and we didn't have to be in the same room. And I remember there was one day, like I had just gotten an injection that's kind of a bone marrow booster. And so I was in so much pain, but we had trivia scheduled and I was able to just lay in my bed with a heating pad, but like have camera off and still like contribute to trivia. And we ended up winning that day. So it was so much fun. So I highly recommend trying to find like virtual activities and I'm competitive. Not everybody is. Maybe they're creative and there's some sort of crafting class or paint night or something like that you could do virtually, or you know, anything like that. I think my favorites I've done with work, we did a virtual cooking class, which would be tough if your friend is not feeling well, but if they are feeling up to it, that was a really fun way to be like together but not together. And then we would kind of afterwards, the cooking class teacher went offline and we all kind of sat and ate together like on Zoom. And that was really fun. Check out Sporkle for trivia, the escape game for escape rooms. There are so many virtual options that can be really great to help your friend feel supported from afar. And this applies to COVID, but even when they're just not feeling well or not feeling up for visitors, I think, the virtual stuff, the distance stuff, like it's always going to be necessary, especially for cancer patients who are so immune compromised. So I was hoping that I would never have to talk about COVID and cancer again, but I think it's relevant again. So here we are.
Yeah, it was a great article. You shared a couple of the ideas out there. Go check it out, be-present.org. You can find the blog out there. Look for one of our most recent articles, and you shared all the links out to some of the companies that facilitate some of these virtual events. So that's great, even if you are looking to connect with somebody from afar or looking to organize a team virtual event. I think you gave so many great ideas there. One person that lived through this with you and had to work through the parameters of COVID and supporting their friend was our guest today. Chiara, why don't you introduce who we're going to be speaking with today?
Yes, so I am super excited to introduce one of my best friends since grade 8, Samantha Bundy. We met in high school. I think she will tell you a little bit more about how we met. I guess it was junior high, actually, 8th grade. So yeah, it's been a while. We've been friends basically that whole time. And she has been one of the most amazing supporters to me. She's an absolute rock. And so I'm really excited to hear her perspective and her side of what it's like to be a supporter. So Samantha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Sam, I'm curious, Chiara shared a little bit about your guys' relationship in the prep interview, but why don't you start us off kind of pre-diagnosis? You and Chiara, sounds like 8th grade you met. What were you guys like through, 8th grade, through the last, through high school and college? You have a fun memory you want to share?
That's a loaded question. I think, well, we've been friends, I think it could have been the first day of 8th grade. I changed to the new school and we were at an assembly and my mom had let me get my ears pierced for the 8th grade, which was a huge deal. I wasn't supposed to be able to get them until I was 16 and I was fiddling with it and it came out. And so I'm crying in the bathroom, trying to put it back in. And Chiara was nice enough to be dealing with my crying self the first day of 8th grade. And I was okay, she's legit, we can be friends. And yeah, like Chiara said, we've been friends ever since. And I didn't have a whole lot of my school friends visit me in college, but Chiara came almost every year that she was not studying abroad. And just being able to intertwine those parts of our lives, and we've worked at the same company for a couple seasonal jobs and just been able to sort of stay sort of woven into each other's lives. And yeah, we've definitely gone through multiple different phases of of life together, good and bad. So yeah, that's us.
So Chiara, what's the other side of that story with the earring?
I don't remember that. That's so funny. I think for me, that was just if anyone was crying in the bathroom it probably would have been me if it wasn't Sam crying in the bathroom about their earrings, but I feel like I would have done that with anyone. So that's so funny. I feel like the first memory I have of Samantha in high school was sitting on the lawn outside of high school and people were mixing us up, which I don't think we look that similar, but I remember people used to mix us up a lot. So especially in grade 8.
That's awesome. So was Sam one of the first people you told after you were diagnosed with cancer? And if so, and not even if so, what did that moment look like whenever you told Sam?
Yeah, so my diagnosis was a little bit interesting because when I had the biopsy, they basically told me we would bet money that this is cancer, in different words. And so when I got home from there, I texted Sam I texted our group chat of all of our good friends and just was hey, here's what's going on. I'm not okay. And I distinctly remember Sam texting back well, you don't know yet. Just because it's cancer doesn't mean it's full on metastatic breast cancer. And lo and behold, here we are. So yeah, Sam, what was that like on the other side? I don't think we've ever even spoken about this.
Well, like you said, it was sort of disjointed, right? Because it was like during COVID and there was like all these different, like, there was an MRI machine out. And so things were delayed and like all these different things. And it didn't, from my side of the, situation, it didn't feel very linear. But I remember like getting that text and like just being sort of going to like this side of optimism of like, well, we don't know what it's going to be like. So, even though they say it might be, like, we don't know anything yet. And I think, so many breast cancer stories or cancer stories in general are like this moment in time, right? Where it's like, it happens and then you go through treatment and then that's this part of your story. And so that's sort of how I pictured this all going. But definitely I went to that like, okay, well, let's not do anything rash. We don't know what's going on. And I think, it was a weird text to get. And I think it was towards the end of the week, right? So we were like, we have to go into the weekend, not hearing from doctors, and like, what will next week bring?
And it was a long weekend too. So that was like delaying the biopsy results by like 3 days that they wouldn't have been otherwise. And like, it was a whole thing. And then once we got the final like metastatic, like there is no coming back from this, like what went through your head at that point?
Well, there's so many parts of it, right? Like I went through the overwhelming, like, hold on, like we're supposed to be like together in a nursing home, like knitting when we're 90, like not even knowing each other's names. Like that's friendship, and like, well, what about like my children and my future home, like all these different things, like how much of that is she going to be part of? And that was a super overwhelming sort of like process to go through, at the same time as Chiara's dealing with a huge diagnosis, and so I can't put my emotional baggage onto her because she's processing her own stuff. And I think that was like the biggest thing to go through, like in the beginning. But then after, it was like, okay, we sort of have this plan in our head when a friend is diagnosed with cancer of like, you're going to do a meal train and you're going to do this and you're going to be there on Wednesdays when they get back from chemo. And like, when that really wasn't the journey that we were about to embark on, that sort of shifted things. And there was a lot of question marks, like, how do I be helpful? What do I do next? And all the while I'm like, how do I feel about this? And how do I then, help her through that?
So you're talking about like meal trains and a lot of the things that you would do to like support someone with cancer. I feel like if it were you or one of our other friends who were diagnosed, I wouldn't even know to go that far. Like what was your experience with cancer before this, and how did you kind of know of all of these things?
I feel like I've had a number of people that I'm like loosely connected with who've gone through cancer treatment, like multiple coworkers, kids that I've worked with, my mom's friends, and just seeing like what they've gone through and what they've talked about, like moms, and even Christina Braverman on Parenthood goes through a breast cancer journey. And like, I think that was one of the first like real, like deep, terrible, like on the floor, vomiting, like in the middle of cancer treatment visuals that we got to see on the media. And so I think just like seeing examples, but I also like, I was on Reddit. I was like, is there a cancer support Reddit thread? And a lot of it, there was like a caregiver's spouses mostly were who were posting. But yeah, I think it's just like seeing little examples here and there was really all that I knew.
That's super smart of you to go to Reddit. I feel like, what were some of those things that you learned on Reddit that you're like, okay, this has got to help me my first 30 days, 60 days with Chiara?
I think just everything just said, just be there. Like, you're not always going to know the right thing to say. You're not always going to, pick the right thing or whatever it might be, but just being there. And the other thing that I don't know, I've sort of questioned it, something like be normal around that person, like don't tiptoe. And I think that's important. And I ask Chiara like all sorts of detailed questions. I'm like, wait, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Tell me more. And like, I know that she'll tell me, like, I don't want to talk about it if she needs to. But I think just going, about your normal business and your normal friendship and having those conversations is important. But I think it's also important to acknowledge, what that person's going through. And I know, Chiara shared before that like it's hard when people are going through these big life changes and she can't always like celebrate in that because that's not necessarily her experience. And so being mindful of like being normal, but also acknowledging, what the other person's going through. Those are the biggest things I think, were themes on Reddit and online. But there's no guide for this. There's no girlfriend's guide to your friend getting cancer.
Well, I mean, I remember you texting me almost those exact words like months ago. And that was when I first came across Be Present, like one of the things that really drew me to it, because it was like, there's so many amazing organizations doing research and chemo care bags and stuff like that. But Be Present was so unique in like helping supporters as well. And so that was what really drew me to Be Present and part of why I wanted to have you on today. But I think we also, I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot, right? Where you want to stay normal, but things also have changed. Like it's not a normal friendship. And we've talked before, like it's been kind of a learning curve of relearning how to communicate with each other. So what did that look like?
Well, I think, the other part of it is that because we've been so disconnected with COVID, like we've texted way more than we ever have in the past, because sometimes we don't know when the next time we'd see, each other, COVID, cancer, whichever the reason, and so I think that has sort of been part of the shift. But I think just having a more open dialogue and like being willing to like call each other out on stuff that like makes us feel comfortable, I think that's been a shift in the world recently, just in that like holding people accountable for certain words or behaviors or educating friends. So I think that mixed with the fact that we're having these very strange conversations that we didn't expect to be having before we're 30 has sort of forced us, like all bets are off, there are no rules, no logic, and we just sort of have to go for it. And sometimes, that's created not big conflict, but it's created more conflict for us than we've had to deal with before.
Yeah, I think we've always been pretty, like, first of all, we were always the friends, I feel like, who never texted in between seeing each other, but then we would see each other and like everything was exactly the same. So I think this was tough, but also like, yeah, the conflict aspect of it, I don't think we ever had a fight. Not that we've like fought since, but we've definitely had to like, we've had conflict since. So how did you navigate that? Because I feel like there's also, I don't want to say a power struggle, but it's different, right? When I'm in a spot where I'm going through treatment, I'm vulnerable, but you still are a person and you deserve to have your needs in a friendship met.
Yeah, I think boundaries are important with any friendship. And like, there's times when, I'm like, I'm not even going to bring that up because it's just not worth it. And that's not, I do that with my mom. I do that with my friends, but I think that it makes me think a little bit more like, where is this going to be? But, I have my own health struggles and they're different. And so in some ways I can, provide a little bit of commiseration, I feel that too, or like, I'm exhausted today too, but at the same time, it has to be, it's hard because sometimes I want to be like, yeah, you're tired, I'm tired too, and that's hard because you don't want to come off like a jerk. And it's this fine balance between like, I want you to see that like what you're experiencing right now is a normal human behavior, and like, and also not discounting the fact that like you're going through active cancer treatment, and like that's difficult. So I think you said it last time you were on the podcast, that like sometimes you're just not going to say the right thing, and that's okay. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it sounds like just normal friendship in general. I mean, I think we all have a lesson to be learned, and sometimes you're not always going to say the right thing to your friends, or you were mentioning a family member with your mom there too. And there's some of this resurrection that has to happen afterwards to fix things. But Chiara was telling me some like really fun things that you did. Just for context, are you guys in the same city, or were you guys in the same city whenever this happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
We weirdly, we've all, like our core group of high school friends all went really far away to college and then all came back to the same spot, which is really random. So we're all here.
And if people haven't listened to the last episode where Chiara, you shared a lot of your cancer story as well, this happened September 2020, correct?
Yes.
So we were 6 months into COVID, still at that time, especially in California, things were very, very locked down. And then being immunocompromised as well, you have to be extra careful. So I know, Sam, you got kind of creative on a few different ways that you guys could hang out and you could support. I believe there was like food was something that Chiara kept telling me about whenever we were prepping for this. You're like, you knew what to bring her. So why don't you expand on that a little bit? It's like some of the ideas, where they came from, like, and then Chiara, feel free to add your flavor into this too. Some of the things that Sam did that was really amazing. But I'd love just to share a couple ideas out there if somebody is supporting somebody that's going through cancer right now. Some of like the ideas that you could throw out, even with the restrictions that COVID puts on it right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of it is it doesn't really matter what it is. Like a random act of kindness is a random act of kindness. And so people feel that emotion regardless of what you're giving them to a certain extent. And so for me, it just felt like, you know, what can I do to just remind Chiara that we're thinking of her and that we care? And like there was a couple of days where like we had plans and things fell apart because, you know, she wasn't feeling well, or, you know, the restrictions kept changing here in California. And so, you know, thinking through like, yeah, I haven't ever had cancer before, but like I've had the flu and I felt really terrible. So like, what did I want then? Okay, I wanted something to distract me. I wanted like something that, you know, maybe I could taste if I, you know, had a cold or something, you know, something that would, you know, soothe my symptoms. And so just like putting together random things, and it doesn't have to happen all the time, you know, and even something happening a little bit less frequently, but still being really mindful just shows people that you care. And then also, you know, there's this gap with COVID because we couldn't always be there. Like when this first started, I was like, I'll be with you and we'll watch rom-coms and like, you know, you'll be on IV drip chemo and like, it'll be cute. And that's not what happened. And so, you know, finding ways to be there through treatment. So we put together a bracelet for Chiara, and I seem to be connected to a couple different of her groups of friends just because I've met them. And so, you know, reaching out to them and finding something that we could do that would remind her that we were thinking of her and that we were all united as a group of friends. And that was what was important to me, is that it isn't just a bunch of individual people. It's you have a care support network that's communicating with each other and cares for you. And, you know, we haven't used it that much, but I think it's important to connect with that group so that Chiara doesn't have to feel like if there's something big that's happening for her, that she doesn't have to reach out to 10 different separate people, that one of us can do that so that, you know, it's not, you know, emotionally burdensome over and over again, just to update people on where she's at.
Wait, that's kind of interesting. So you were like almost the lead of this support group. Am I getting that right? And Chiara too, is that something that is like a lift a burden for you? Is this something that a lot of patients go through, that they have to organize a lot of what happens behind the scenes and they don't have the energy to do it?
Well, I think I assumed you guys had some sort of group chat. I didn't know how you would connect with some of the people who were part of the bracelet otherwise. So yeah, I assumed you guys had some sort of group chat, but I think it kind of goes back to what the Be Present, Be There tool does. of just allowing you to make one update and everyone gets that update and everyone knows where you're at, versus me having, like, I have so many different, like, my work friends and my like extracurricular work friends and my gym friends and my high school friends and my college friends and, you know, everybody. And it's really hard to remember to update everyone. And so I think it's great that you guys have that and are able to like talk amongst each other. I'm not part of it, so I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a super sophisticated thing. It's like a Facebook group messenger chat. And, you know, it's also important though, like, I didn't ever want Chiara to feel like anyone was talking behind her back, you know, like this is her situation. And so like, yeah, if we can, you know, send a message to like, you know, plan a surprise. But I think it's just important to know that like, we're all here and we all want to be part of this. And so if for some reason Chiara couldn't communicate that, you know, we have already established, you know, what the person's last name is and making sure that they're the right, you know, Susie or whatever. That's just important to make sure that, you know, down the line we can continue to be a support network, especially when you're talking about not a 10-month treatment plan, but, you know, an indefinite treatment plan. Those things, you know, require people to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, interesting. Chiara mentioned in our conversation on the last episode too, this like aspect of cancer humor. Were you involved in this? Like, like, what was your feeling like cancer memes and some of the cancer jokes, and knowing Chiara a little bit as well, she probably like sprung this on you. Did you just go with it or how did you react?
Okay, well, first of all, it's important to note that I'm British and my family is British. So dark humor is like all we know. So that is helpful. So it didn't really like, I get her, but sometimes I have to be like, no, but what you just said there made other people uncomfortable. Like, I'm cool there, but like, do you understand why they just cringed? And she's like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way. You know, like, I think she just doesn't always recognize that like people think about her humor differently. But for me, it's like, you know, I'm here for it because that's what brings her joy. But sometimes I do have to like, you know, face palm, like, really?
Chiara, you got a rebuttal on that?
No, she's absolutely right. She's been a bit of a North Star and like, can I say this?
That's incredible. Well, Sam, I know we're wrapping up our conversation here. You've done so many things right when it comes to support. We will ask you about what support looks like at the end of this conversation, but Chiara and Sam both, is there anything else you guys want to share about your guys' journey and support with each other?
I will just say it has been so helpful to have you there and just helping with things and kind of gracefully taking constructive criticism if you don't always get it right. But like, I think I've brought up to everyone who asked me about support how sweet I thought it was that you brought over like bone broth and ice cream and magazines when I had like mouth sores that I couldn't open my mouth really, and like just stuff like that. So yeah, I think just everyone should have a Sam.
Love you lots. That's all I have to say in rebuttal.
You guys are awesome. Thanks for including me in this conversation. Sam, if people want to connect with you, they resonated with something you said, they're looking to be a better supporter, where can they reach out to you?
I have an Instagram called Sustainable Samantha, and it's sort of, you know, a fun little side project, but I definitely am open to conversations with people who just are like, I'm going through this and I don't have all the answers, but maybe together we can, you know, find a way to support each other.
Awesome. So our final question for you, Sam, you know, you mentioned there's no, what did you call it? Like, guide or booklet for if your friend or your babe goes through cancer. But that is why we're creating this podcast and sharing some of the success stories and lessons learned through here. So I'd love to know, you know, what does great support look like to you? And if you want to elaborate on that too, anything else you'd like to kind of share throughout your journey that you've learned about support?
I think the biggest one, I mean, we talked about it before, but it's just be there in whatever capacity you can be. You know, I made a commitment to myself at the beginning, of all this is like, if Chiara asks me to do something, I'm going to say yes if I can, and like that, I can't always. I have my own boundaries. I have a job, I have a family, but trying to say yes as often as possible is something that I'm trying to live, in my normal life. And then in every, different aspect of my relationships as well. And so I think, support is important, but it goes both ways. We support each other in all sorts of different things. And so just, being there, being willing to listen, being willing to grow. But I think support can be different for any single person, which is really hard because, like we're talking about creating some sort of guide, the reason the guide doesn't exist is because for every single person, their needs are different. And you kind of have to write that for each person and for each stage. Chiara, there's certain things that she needs on a Monday that she doesn't need on a Sunday, and those things are going to change every day. And I'm the same way. So just being willing to be there and learn is the only way you can, I think, really be a good support network.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam, for taking the time to share your insights. I think this will be hugely helpful to other supporters. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.